Hey, everybody, we're going to get started here in a couple of minutes. We'll allow a few more people to come through and then we'll get started. So just sit tight. All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our event, the launch with Localvest. My name is Jake Dooley. I'm the CEO of Localvest and a Navy veteran. And I'd like to thank all of you who have logged in and listening today, or if you're watching the recording, thanks for watching at a later point. To tell you more about Localvest, we are all about helping veterans raise money for their businesses, whether that's a real estate syndication or a startup company, alternative investment, or a fund. We're all about trying to help companies be able to raise the capital that they need to grow. Today we're going to hear from two of those companies. We are using a Zoom webinar format. So for those of you who are coming in as attendees or as guests, we can't see you, we won't be able to hear you, but the chat is open. So feel free to use that, communicate to each other and back and forth. We'll be dropping some links and some communications type things inside of that chat. So still feel free to use that. You can also ask questions there. If we don't get to those questions, we'll be able to go back and answer those questions for you after the event is over. We're going to hear from two different companies today. And as they speak, they're going to give their presentation and I'm going to ask some questions. If I can get to some of them that you ask, I will. But again, if not, just ask that question, we'll do it. We'll also have some polls that are out there to keep it fun and exciting for you. So if you get the chance and see one of those pop up on the screen, be sure to answer that poll as we shift back and forth between the companies. With that, we have two incredible companies to hear from today. And I think you'll really be excited to hear about what they have to say that they're working on. So without further ado, let's get started. So for our first company, I'll introduce our speakers. We have Justin Brennan, the founder and CEO. He's a third-generation multifamily investor with over 15 years of experience in multifamily development, renovations, and asset management. He is a licensed general contractor and a real estate broker who started with a $100,000 rental condo in the middle of the financial crisis, and he's built it into a multi-million dollar apartment enterprise with assets in multiple states throughout the U.S. With him, he has his co-founder, Chris Pohle, who's a Marine Corps veteran. And Chris comes from the tech and military information field. And he uses his Silicon Valley relationships, such as Peter Thiel and military government connections with those of high net worth individuals and family offices to guide and grow the Brennan Pohle Group's capital efforts. And the third person I have with them today is Rudy Medina. And Rudy's with Next Space Development, and they are a co-general partner with Chris and Justin. And he's been involved in the acquisition and development of hundreds of millions of dollars of commercial and multifamily projects. He has experience in finance and successful multifamily properties that spans over 4 decades. So I'll let them take you through from here and talk to you more about their projects. So Justin, I'll let you go ahead and take it away from here.
Mute myself. There we go.
All
I'm
right.
unmuted. Perfect. How's everybody doing today? Appreciate everybody taking a little bit of your time and taking a look at some opportunities here. Let me click the screen. So this is the Oaks. We're located in the medical district of Northwest San Antonio. It's a 121 unit multifamily property that we purchased in December of 2021. And for the last 12 months, we've been in the renovation value add stage of the project, and now entering kind of stage 2, which is stabilization of the property. This was an aerial taken not too long ago, I think in the fall of this last year. And I'll kind of go through a lot of the metrics and stuff, but just kind of want to give you an aerial of the project, where we're located at. You can see the medical district there in the background. We back up to the Oak Hills Country Club, which is one of the more prestigious country clubs in Northwest San Antonio. So fabulous location along a very busy kind of street, which is great for visibility and traffic. So today's presentation, to kind of keep it brief, but hopefully thorough enough, we're going to go through the investment itself, the property and the timeline. Oops. Let's go back here. I don't know why that did that. There we go. The property and the timeline, the business plan that we're executing. And then if you have some interest, how to get in contact with us and invest in the project. As I mentioned, this is an existing project that we purchased a year ago. We're recapitalizing it with more equity versus debt, and I'll kind of go through that here briefly for you. So any investors coming into it, you're getting a 12% preferred return, and you're going to get 70% of the profits. And this is really more of a risk mitigated investment in one of the nation's fastest growing cities, San Antonio. And I'll go through some of the metrics on San Antonio specifically. We're raising an additional $2.5 million more of equity to buy down the debt. I mean, everybody knows what's happened over the last year with the Fed raising 7 times in a kind of an unprecedented manner, but we're really there to raise more capital. The business plan is currently on schedule. We're raising really this money at a time that we thought we were going to raise it anyways. But instead of using debt, which is not as advantageous at the moment, we're preferring to use more equity and kind of de-risk the asset and stabilize it here this year. Some of the metrics below here, we bought the property for $12,950,000. This is actually closer to $7.5 million of total equity that's going to be in it with the new equity coming in. The CapEx budget, we've already put in about $1,566,000 of improvements. I'll go through some of that here briefly. Investor internal rate of returns projected around 13 to 15% with an equity multiple around 1.8. And then I went through these on the preferred return and the profit splits. So real quick, just kind of diving through the location, which we talked about briefly, but we're located very strategically in and around the northwest portion of San Antonio, which is about 60 miles from Austin, and in the northern portion around the medical district, which you see highlighted here. Also major companies, USAA's world headquarters is located here. You have 4 military bases, Army and Air Force, all located within the San Antonio region. The NSA, the National Security Agency's Central Command of the United States, is located 4 miles from our property. Out of the, obviously you have the East Coast NSA, but then this is the next major one located here in San Antonio. And then we back up to this Oak Hills Country Club. Just to the right of us, 2 doors down, is an A-class building. Around the corner in the medical district is A-class. I've always said, you kind of want to be Walmart surrounded by Neiman Marcus, JCPenney, Nordstrom, because you're always going to be full. Right? You want to be the B surrounded by the A's. So that way in good markets and bad markets, people are always shopping at Walmart. They're always going to typically, fulfill into the B class apartment complexes too. So kind of breaking down real quick, the property sources and uses and where we're at and where we're going with it. You saw the purchase price there. Our CapEx improvements total will be at about $1.8 million and some change. All the title closing points, working capital, everything that's in the deal now and coming forth is right around that $1,690,000. And then when we refinance the property, which is coming due here soon, is to put on fixed rate debt at about 5.8%, somewhere in the range of 9.8 to 10.5 million of fixed rate debt. And so therefore, when you break down the equity, our current investors in the deal now, including ourselves, have about 5 million in the deal. And then we've also agreed to increase that about $1.5 million with the current investors. So really, we have about $1 million more to raise to fulfill the $7.5 million commitment to basically buy down the debt, increase the equity of the property, and stabilize it going into 2023 here. Some of the metrics kind of down below that you can kind of see: 121 units, average unit size, year built. Once we're fully kind of stabilized with maximum net operating income and everything that we're setting forth, we're going to be at around a cap rate close to 7%, and then planning to sell the property back down around a 5%. Even with the capital markets the way they are today, with the Fed and what they've done, et cetera, cap rates were down into the 4s prior to what happened, and now they've kind of pumped up. So we're projecting an exit cap rate right around that 5% range. Current occupancy, you can see that, and that's now increasing. Part of the business plan that we went through in this property was not only the renovation side of it, which 100% of the exterior is done, about 70% of the interior is done, is really changing the tenant demographic as well, because they had a lot of folks in there that just weren't paying rent, et cetera, et cetera. So we've pretty much gotten 95+% of them out, and now the occupancy is now popping back up. And as we come through the slow season into the spring, we'll get well into the 90% range here pretty shortly. So kind of showing you a bit of the offering. If you were to invest, say, $50,000, what that kind of looks like, both from an equity multiple standpoint, internal rate of return, the preferred return you're getting, profit splits, et cetera. And then on the right-hand side over there, kind of how the capital stack breaks down. And I was kind of looking at this. I did see a little bit of a typo, but it's going to be closer to about 43% total equity in the deal, around that $7.5 million range if we're pulling down this kind of debt. So that changes it a little bit. So more equity, less debt. So timeline in the execution of kind of where we've been at, where we're at today, and where we're going. As I'd mentioned, we acquired the property back in December 2021. Next stage was going through the renovations, which was 2022. So we have 100% of the exterior renovations complete, about 65 to 70% of the interior renos done, about 83 units of the 121. And this year is really all about stabilization and refinancing, and basically buying down the debt, increasing the equity, as we've said, and using more equity versus debt, given this environment we're at today. And then really 24 through 2026, 2027 is really the cash flow years through stabilization, and then exiting that property, based on our existing time frame, was always around that 3 to 5 year mark. So as I'd mentioned, what we've kind of completed so far, this is a proven rent model already. So, and we'll kind of go through some things, but rather than getting into a new deal where everything's kind of projection based, we've already kind of proven that the rents have increased, and we're getting $200 to $300 per unit bumps on those units that we're renovating. So you're not having to wonder whether or not we can hit those. We're already hitting them. We've completed 100% of the exterior, 70% of the interior, as I mentioned, increased the gross potential income of the property over $400,000 a year already. We're adding 4 new sources of other income, which is actually starting now. And that includes cable income, reserved parking, washer dryer rentals, and some other things that are coming in as we speak. We've removed already, thankfully, about 96% of the problem tenants that were in there previously. So we're getting out the last chunk, which happened in December and now here in January. So really moving forward, we've kind of flip-flopped that whole thing in a 12-month window. Some of the opportunities still remaining. We still have 38 to 40 units left to renovate. We're adding the fitness center right now as we speak. We'll increase the rents 3 to 5% a year, and occupancy at 95% plus, and then reducing the delinquency on the property, adding the other income, and then really fine tuning the operations from both expenses and revenue side. This is always fun, is before and after photos. So this is before. Tired property, 1970s built, orange, yellow, brown, just, it was there, but it needed some TLC to kind of show what it could become. And, we saw the opportunity given the location. It's an A location. And you basically have, the ugly duckling on the block, if you want to call it that now we've flip-flopped into one of the nicest on the block in kind of that B asset category of multifamily. This is our current renovations. So both interior and exterior, we went with a white black theme with some red door pop, kind of gave it that really cool look. Changed the courtyard with a play set and all these other things, cornhole and Connect Four and all these other things. Totally redid the pool, resurfaced it, everything you can imagine. Interiors, from countertops to vinyl to appliances to the whole 9 yards. You can kind of see the before and after, just by looking at brown and yellow and a nice clean look. And this is where we're at today. Some of the job employers, as I'd mentioned, you have the 4 major military bases. You have Hulu, you have the NSA, USAA's world headquarters, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of major employers, pretty dynamic market there in San Antonio. Some recent projects we've been involved with, just kind of thought I'd throw them up here on the screen. This is the only property currently that isn't fully stabilized yet. All the other properties in our portfolio, we've gone through this already. We've done the renos, done the refinancing, done the stabilizing. They're all on fixed rate debt. So similar thing. So this is the remaining one in our portfolio. Sponsorship team, really includes myself, Christopher Pohle, Rudy Medina, who has an enormous background in this side of things, been doing this 40 plus years, and then his partner, Richard Simis. So our co-general partnership together is a really great team with enormous experience in the multifamily field from both ground up development as well as existing products and value add. And that is it. I hope did I do okay on time?
You did fine. Yeah, you did fine.
All right. So yeah, if there's any questions, love to help answer them now. And, we kind of go from there. So
sure. Well, why don't I jump in one? Because I noticed there's companies come in and have different value add projects that they work on, but you mentioned a few things in there that make you different. So could you talk more about what makes this investment better or different than other investment opportunities that are out in the market today?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things to note is, it's not a new project, it's an existing one. And so we're mitigating a lot of those risks that sometimes come about with new projects, right? Where you're projecting, hey, these rents, and you're projecting these expenses, and you're projecting all these things that you hope and pray will come to fruition, but they're projections on a new deal. And this is one that's already been in process. We've executed a good portion of the business plan. We're already executing on a lot of those terms. So as with any project, most of the risk lies in really 3 factors. It's the operations, it's the leasing, and the financing. Right? Those are the 3 big risk factors in multifamily. And 2 of those we've already kind of mitigated. It's the financing side, which is now we're taking control of, where we're increasing the equity and decreasing the debt. And so this is kind of the whole goal of you're getting into something that really is more risk mitigated. And a lot of the business plan's already been proven.
Okay. Now, how did you find San Antonio and choose that market?
Yeah, Chris, did you want to chime in on this one?
Yeah, I think we did a lot of extensive research, but ultimately the reason why we chose San Antonio was because when we compared that market to the other markets within Texas, like even when you compare it to against Austin, we're seeing that, that San Antonio, one of the fastest growing cities in the United States with the population growth, but in 2022, like this year, they're outpacing growth in rental space, comparatively to Austin, to any, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth. So we're always looking at the opportunity for growth. Now, of course, we know that, like overall San Antonio is a huge city in itself. It's grown at like the 7th largest state, 7th largest city. But the main thing was to identify a market that we saw opportunity, where we actually saw growth. And then you couple that with the BRAC realignments, everything else that's coming in to place, a lot of it, the medical and support Sam Houston, NSA. We all know that how money's being thrown in that direction. That made it the perfect ecosystem for us to see the opportunity to offer our investors, the actual growth opportunity. Okay. That was pretty much the biggest reason. And great people, and Texas, loved it so much, moved out here. So.
Okay. That's right. You mentioned the markets a few times in there. Could you talk more about how the market impacted your business plan from when you purchased to today?
Yeah, no, the market today in terms of the good news is the market today has not affected or impacted the execution of our business model at all, or the timeline to stabilize the property. It has influenced kind of our approach now. And that's kind of what I was talking on earlier, is we want to increase the equity and decrease the debt to buy that down, just given the environment, right? Which just makes sense. And it will really help cash flow the asset better given the environment that's in play. But it has not impacted the execution, our ability to lease. The rental market is strong. We're hitting the rents. All of that execution side is great. It's changed our approach on the financing side.
Okay. If I were to ask, how did you figure out or learn about Localvest?
That guy down on my screen right there. My business partner, Christopher Pohle. He's a former Marine. Also Bill Militello. He's been friends for 10 years, and he's actually one of the lead investors on this deal. Has over $1 million in this deal right now, so he vouches for it. And he introduced us to this platform, Localvest, which I think is fabulous. And then obviously Chris is involved here with being a former Marine.
Yeah, I have an opportunity to work with Bill through multiple companies and deals and his advisement. It's been, I was really glad to see him start this platform and promote, veteran businesses, with the same aggression of any Marine. So it's been a great opportunity to work with him, and I'm excited to see how Localvest has grown.
Yeah, and then just like kind of two things, and Chris had touched on this about San Antonio, because I think these are really, really cool stats. San Antonio was the #1 city for population growth in the United States for 2021. And then Chris had also mentioned in 2022, the rent increase ratio percentage, the rate of increase for rents in San Antonio outpaced even Austin, Texas, which was fabulous. So just some kind of stats and things that people don't understand when you think of San Antonio. And San Antonio is the 7th largest city in the United States. Most people don't know that.
It's all about growth opportunity and offering our investors the opportunities that make sense growth-wise.
Got you. I have to say, when we, for everybody who don't know, that we were doing our preparation calls for this, and Justin, you've been living on site correctly, working and making sure everything gets done, right? If I have that correctly.
Yeah, I just got back yesterday. So like anything, when the time gets to crunch and because we had 15 units in renovation status, and I just wanted to make sure that our staff on site wasn't getting overwhelmed and we can execute that. With my background in construction, I moved on site for the last 2 weeks, and we took those units from being almost 0% done to 100% done in 2 weeks, 15 units. That way they're ready for the tenants that are moving in as we speak. And it was critical from the operational standpoint. Yeah.
For me, that was a very impressive thing. Your company has the track record for doing this, and you're well along in the projected plans for this one, and you're there on site, and all of you are putting everything in to figure out how to get this one, through its completion. So you're on plan and adapting to the situation that you have. And it sounds like you have a really great structure here. So I'm pretty impressed with what you have going here, and a pretty great market too.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think we're close in our time here. So thank you all for presenting there. And what we're going to do now is we're going to switch to our next company and showcase them as well. Actually, before I say that, as we go through and we do the transition, we didn't get to your questions. We're capturing all of those. Contact information is in the chat, and it's also on the last slide. So you will have plenty of opportunities that you can reach out to Justin or Chris and be able to talk with them about their project there in San Antonio. But we're going to switch now, as I said, over to our next company here. So allow me to introduce and clear a few things off my screen. I'll wait if we can project the next slide forward, and I do think you have a question up there for you. But our next company is Myndshft, and we have 2 people with us today to talk about Myndshft. So we have Ron, who is the founder and CEO of Myndshft. He's an engineer by training and has 30 years of experience automating and optimizing time-consuming healthcare administrative tasks. He's had some executive positions at leading financial, manufacturing, outsourcing, and customer experience companies. He's a graduate of the Naval Academy, which is always a good background to have. He served for 5 years as service warfare officer, including service in Desert Storm. And then with him today is Tyler, whose journey into the world of technology started by performing data analytics and building reproducible data pipelines for clinical and biological research labs before transforming more into a training and leadership role by teaching people of all ages how to code and create high quality applications. So writing code and leading others who love coding is Tyler's passion. And so both of them are going to be talking about their company. Gentlemen, I will turn it over to you and I look forward to it.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. One of the things just to mention, in my background, I don't think we shared this with you, Jake, but I was actually enlisted before I went to the dark side.
Oh, really? Okay.
So
I didn't know that. That's good stuff. Great.
yeah, that just is to paint a picture for how old I really am. So,
Understood.
all right. So why don't we just go ahead and jump in? Thanks for that introduction, Jake. It was perfect. So the next slide, please. So I'll just touch quickly on this because I think it'll come back up again. The way that we think about our business and what really kind of drives us is the fact that we can measure directly how we impact patients, how do we help them get access to care, the things that we're trying to solve that we'll talk about in this deck as we go through it is that in most cases, it's really hard for you to see a line of sight on when you're going to be able to actually impact a patient and see them get an output. In our particular case, we're able to do that and have a linear. So we'll talk more about the why. One of those patient stories in that over 1 million patient lives is what really drove us to found the company and get going. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So next slide, please. So what we'll be talking about today is essentially we've developed a platform to power what we call real-time healthcare benefits and electronic prior auth. It may sound simple, but you know, a lot of providers, as they're trying to navigate how do we make sure we're going to get paid, the technology that's in place today is pretty old and doesn't necessarily lend itself to helping them do that without impacting their time that they can allocate for care. So what we've been working on since we founded the company about 4 years ago is continue to evolve this platform, real-time healthcare benefits. Do they have coverage? How much are they going to owe? And electronic prior auth, which is really kind of the sizzle in the steak lately as far as how the company is really driving a lot of growth. We're one of the only, if not the only, SaaS solution for electronic prior authorization. So we'll talk more about that. Next slide. So I'll just talk a little bit about prior authorization. You can read the slide yourself, but basically prior auth is one of those processes that was created about a decade or so ago. It's actually forms and flavors of it been around for a lot longer than that, but prior authorization basically says if you're going to provide care, if you're a provider and you're going to provide care, in some cases, if it's an expensive care, or if it's a new type of care that's kind of new and has not been tested much, you got to go ask the payer if it's okay for you to do that. So the way that typically looks is that a provider may decide, hey, you know, Ron needs a knee replacement surgery. There's a whole bunch of steps that doctor has to go through in order to get permission from the payer to allocate that payment to the payer, so to make sure that they get paid. And there's a lot of things that happen, and I'll share on the next slide on how that happens today. In the market today, there's no SaaS solution for that. 90% of it's done manually. It requires a lot of time. And so we're one of the first innovators in that space to where we can automate the end-to-end process for both payers and for providers, with most of our revenue today coming from the provider space. So next slide. So this is a really simplified version of what happens between a provider and a health plan. Patient needs that replacement, knee replacement surgery. Provider asks the payer, hey, you know, I'm submitting for an authorization to do this. That authorization gives them a code that basically says, yep, we've authorized you to do it and we're going to pay you for that. That information will get submitted to health plan. 9 times out of 10, if not more, they'll go, well, wait a minute, we have some questions about this request, and they'll send a request back to the provider, and they'll have to fill that information out. They'll send it back over to the provider or to the payer, and this will continue probably 3, 4, 5 times, sometimes more than that. And even there are times where they actually have to get on a phone call and resolve this provider to a doctor that works for the health plan. As you can see, the vast majority of the time, this is, hey, you got to log into a portal, and just to give you context around that, there's about 1,300 different portals that you got to have credentials to and be able to manage if you're a provider. And then they also may call the call center because that may be faster. That's a very expensive way to do it. And it can take 2 to 3 hours sitting on hold to get the answer back if you wanted to do it the same day. or you can do it via fax. Believe it or not, about 70 to 80% of the volume in healthcare today is still done via fax instead of electronically like you would normally do with your bank. So that back and forth is a combination of phone calls and faxes and emails that go back and forth between them. In the meantime, the patient can't get the care that they need, so they're sitting and waiting to hear back from the doctor. And until that happens, they can't even get that knee replacement surgery scheduled. And so they'll potentially continue to suffer through pain. The doctor will forego revenue. The facility that's doing the surgery has to reschedule and put somebody else into that time slot. In the meantime, the payer side is spending a lot of money trying to get that prior authorization processed and approved. That process is, as it exists today, is costs a lot of time and money for payers and providers, and certainly impacts care for the patients. Next slide, please. So these are just some statistics on what it means for the healthcare providers. In general, it costs every physician about $60,000 to $80,000 a year for them to do prior authorization processing. And so this could be a couple of days a week that they allocate. So that means one person working 2 full business days to submit about 41 of these per week on average, depending on what practice you're in. If you're in something like surgery, that may be a much higher. You may be submitting a lot more of those. 60% of the time, they don't have the money to allocate a full-time staff. So they're just using people that happen to have time sitting at the registration desk. They may not have specialization around prior authorization. They may not have the clinical knowledge. And then a lot of times they will end up having to, eat some expense before they actually get reimbursed by the provider or by the payer. It also is the #1 reason for denials on payments for providers. So that's why they pay so much attention to it. And keep in mind, about 90% of the time, this is still done manually. 10% of it would be those portals and e-faxes and stuff that I mentioned before. Next slide. So we'll talk about how Myndshft's solving the problem. We basically said, let's turn this into a SaaS solution, software. So we use software to take all of those things, the gathering of, hey, do I need to submit a prior auth for this? And put that into a big brain, that rules engine that we have. That rules engine at some point in the future will contain about 2.5 million different combinations. That's about how many different combinations exist. If you're a provider and you need to go navigate 2.5 million different combinations, you can understand how hard it is for them to go figure out without any kind of automation or any kind of singular source of truth. We provide that source of truth. So that's done automatically in less than a second, tells them if they need to submit a prior auth or not. We then electronically pull that data out of the EMR through an API integration, essentially just a direct EDI connection to their EMR. We package it up in the right format for the payer, do that digitally with software, and then we submit it with that same software over to the payer system, and then they'll receive that in their incoming queue and process that. So processes that taking on the provider side, it could take up to a couple of hours. They can get that done in less than 3 minutes today. And so that begins to reduce the amount of burden on them. It's also a big issue for payers because doctors are starting to drive a lot of complaints about prior authorization. So there's federal regulations coming out, et cetera. We comply with all those new federal and state regulations by automating the process end to end. So this entire turnaround time, if the payer is using our product and the provider is using our product, can get down to 3 to 5 seconds. If it's just the provider using the product, it gets down to about 3 minutes. Next slide. So we'll shift gears a little bit. So that's the product. So we take essentially a 90% manual process today. We fully automate it end to end for both payers and providers. We own both sides of that transaction. So think of it as a 2-sided transaction model. The market for that software has been estimated, not just by us, but by others, at about $3.5 billion a year. And today, the biggest competitor in the market is a tech-enabled service company that does about $15 million a year. So you can see it's a wide open, highly fragmented, almost no SaaS capabilities in the market today. We're an innovator in that space and starting to grow pretty quickly because of that. Next slide. So a couple of tailwinds I just want to mention. So we actually have a fairly strong approach to where we go to market with already embedded software. So if you're an EMR company, if you're a patient access, if you're a practice management solution, if you're a referral management, those are typically all done by legacy software today. We basically embed our technology into that so that we don't have to go do implementations. We can take advantage of their embedded base. We're approaching about 20,000 embedded base locations today through our channel partnerships that are either closed or closing. And so with that, we're going to experience where we were in about 120 or 130 locations at the beginning of last year. We're going to be expanding into a lot more locations over the course of this year. So obviously that's why we're raising money. The other thing I wanted to mention here is we just about 8-10 weeks ago formed a strategic partnership with what formerly was known as Google Health. It's now just underneath Google Cloud. They're off selling our product. They're bringing some pretty massive deals our way in just 8 weeks, 10 weeks in that time that we close that. And then we're also in the process of working on a launch of a joint product that'll be co-branded in the first quarter. It'll get launched, and then big announcement in Hoopla in April at what is known as HIMSS. And then I already mentioned some of the legislative pressure. Every year, there's more and more regulations that come out. There's about 34 states now that have electronic prior auth rules. There were about 10 of them last year alone. CMS just introduced new regulatory pressure around this that everybody's going to have to comply with in about 2.5 years. As far as we know, we're the only provider that's already compliant with all of those legislative requirements for both payers and providers. And that will be in place, and people start working on that now as they have to get compliant in 2.5 years, which may seem like a long time traditionally. It's a really short time in healthcare. Okay, next slide. So these are some of the brands that we work with today. All the way on the left side are kind of those bigger active participants. They have some contracting underway, and then a fairly large pipeline upcoming. And these are all clients that essentially have said, hey, we're going to go build this ourselves, and then arrived at the conclusion they didn't want to build it themselves, that it was too costly, too expensive, going to take too long. And so they decided to work with Myndshft to solve that. In all cases, that's every one of these. It was a buy or build kind of opportunity, and they decided to buy it from us. Next slide. A couple of the brands, a lot of these come from those channel partners that I mentioned before. What you'll see in here is 3 of the top 10 health systems are in our pipeline today. We're at active discussions with them. About 80% of the Blues plans are in our pipeline today through these channel partnerships. And about 70% of the PBMs are in our space today, or in our pipeline today, that are going to drive growth. And in the course of the first quarter here, we're actually going to double the number of clients that we have active on our platform in about a 90-day period just from last quarter. Next slide. So the fundraising, we're basically looking to raise a bridge round. As the last presenter was talking about, the fundraising market is not all that attractive right now with the amount that everybody's kind of waiting to see what happens with interest rates and inflation, all that kind of stuff. So we're putting a bridge round in place to kick the Series A down the road. It's basically a plan still to do that Series A fundraising later in the year. We just don't want to have to do it until the market begins to recover a little bit. So raising $4.5 million, myself and some other internal investors have already put in about $1.5 million of that. And then we have about $3 million available. The only thing to mention there, I put an asterisk on it. Some of those logos that I showed you before are in active discussions to also participate in this Series A, or more recently, there's a few of them that want to invest in the convertible note, the same convertible note, same terms that we're presenting here. So I will take questions. Hopefully I hit the timeline, Jake, or maybe.
Oh yeah, no, that's perfect. I guess we can go through, when we talk about a healthcare company, maybe you can go in some about how that makes maybe an exit strategy different. You're just talking about how some of those companies invest. So maybe talk more about how it looks different from a healthcare perspective.
Yeah, this is probably not a company that we would take public. It's really going to be, it's not that we wouldn't hit that size. We're projecting that we'll be growing at about 300% this year, and then 300% next year. And in about 3 years, we think we'll be somewhere around $50 to $75 million a year in revenue. With that, the multiple would be somewhere around like a 10x to 12x because of the fast growth rate. So you can kind of do the math yourself on what a valuation would be. But in general, there are going to be technology companies that are going to want to buy the company. And we already have some that have reached out to us to gauge interest in selling. We're not in a big hurry because with the growth that we have, we want to take advantage of that. But at some point in the next 24 months, somebody will probably float an offer, but it'll be another health tech company that's going to probably approach us for that versus a go public kind of opportunity.
Okay, interesting. All right. Now you mentioned, I think you said like 2x in your clients in a short period and all that growth. You mentioned Google Cloud coming in, some of those names that were on there. They could bring a lot of growth all at once. How do you expect to manage that type of growth in the company?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jake. It's the one thing I'm losing sleep over. You know, when you're a startup, you always go, gosh, I hope I have enough money to get through the next 6 months. We're just trying to figure out how we keep up with the growth. A couple of those clients that we listed there are already in launch, and we've got to support launching 230 locations when the most we've ever done is like 20 or 30 at a time. So we've actually developed relationships with some systems integrators that have resources to help us. So this will be like I'll give you some logos. They're not necessarily who we're working with, but like IBM and Accenture and Deloitte. Those guys are going to give us some support. And then we've also got some outsourced contractors that can come in and give us some flex capacity so we don't have to go hire a lot of FTE, but we can respond quickly. The timeline is not going to be our friend. It just is when you're growing like crazy, it's going to, take advantage of, it's going to be a lot that you have to work through to get it all done. But we feel like we got a pretty good backup plan to make sure all of that happens. So it's a good question. If you come up with an answer, give me a ring. So.
Okay. A lot of people come out and they see problems with healthcare. I mean, I will say we talked when we were introducing this of not really understanding what prior authorization is. And so to me, it's this healthcare and this complexity, and it is the way it is, but you all didn't say that. How did you even find this problem and pain point and say we are the right people to solve it?
Yeah. So I think I shared this with you, Jake, but let me just tell it again. So we're actually doing some work with one of our initial clients. It's a Fortune 10 healthcare company. And they called me the day after Thanksgiving in 2018, same year we founded the company, and said, hey, I got to tell you a story that I think you're going to find really important and why what you're doing is so important. And the question was, or the comment was, hey, we had a patient, he's a 38-year-old man. He had a brain tumor. He just undergone surgery. He needed to get on therapy at home before he could be discharged. The day before Thanksgiving, it didn't look like he was going to be able to be discharged because it just takes too long to get a prior auth done. It takes too hard to get care planned and all that kind of stuff for him to get discharged. His wife was upset. He was upset. He had 2 small kids. He didn't know if this was going to be his last Thanksgiving that he might have with his kids. And the point she made to me, this person from the company said, because of you guys, we were able to get them not only discharged, but home for what may have been his last Thanksgiving. And that kind of became our why. So I talked about the big number at the beginning. That's who we think about all day long. We talk about it in every presentation, is this individual that we helped him get home for that could be last Thanksgiving. And that's really kind of what drove us to say, we've got to go solve this problem. And it became important. It's hard, it's complex, it's really challenging. And if it could have been solved before, it would have been. But that's why we decided to take on this task.
That's an amazing story. Because I mean, you said you look at it's like $1.1 million or patients affected, and when you each of those is a person in a situation, it could be something like a knee, or it could be something like his case. It's very impressive to be able to make a difference that way. And I still can't believe that there's that many fax machines still in use. It's crazy. I don't know how that is.
Well, they just keep building better fax machines. So
I guess that's the case. That's the case.
Yeah.
All right, as we start to draw down to a close here, I think that's a good spot for us to finish here, because I don't want to respect everybody's lunch hour or part of their day here and not have it drag on longer for us here. So I know we had a couple of polls that we were going to put out there, and I'll let Laura launch those. As we do that, again, the contact information is there. We are going to be sending out a recording. It will also have all the contact information for everybody who was presenting today. So I want to thank everybody who was able to present, Justin and Chris and Ron, and we also had Rudy and Tyler here with us as well. So if you are interested in these companies, I encourage you to check out their deal tile. You can go on Localvest, see more about them, download information from there. As I said, you'll also get the recording information and can reach out to them. If you haven't checked out Localvest in a while, I do encourage you to do so. There's a lot of things are constantly changing there. New companies are coming in and new opportunities. If you have questions about how it works, there's all sorts of spots where it says schedule some time. And that's just, we can show you how it works, whether you're an investor or thinking about needing to raise money. Just schedule some time and either Drazen or one of us will be able to show you how it works. We're always excited to showcase how it goes. So we've dropped that in the chat. If you're interested about how to get to Localvest, you can head over to the website after the webinar. So again, I want to thank everybody for coming out for our Launch with Localvest activity that we had today. We love to do these, try to do one every month when we can to showcase some of the companies that are here on the platform. So thanks for taking some of your day to spend with us, with Myndshft, and with the Oaks. Hopefully some of you can make investments. We have some really great projects. I hope you agree. So thank you. Have a great rest of your day.